Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be taking a look at BX Essentials, which is a series of short little booklets put out that captures all of the rules really from the Basic and Expert editions of early D&D. But before we get into this, I'd like to do a quick shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon who are doing an amazing job keeping this whole channel running and being incredibly generous with their time and with their support and with their money. And if you want to become a patron yourself, there's a link down in the description below, and you get a lot of free special little rewards that only patrons get, including monthly one-page adventures. Anyway, let's get back to the review. So BX Essentials, let me show you one thing here. So this is Basic D&D. So this came out back in the 80s, I believe, or it's a revision of an earlier version of Basic D&D. And what it does is it was intended to be a bridge between original D&D and advanced D&D, although it eventually kind of became its own thing. And this is especially favored among OSR people, mostly because it is a great balance in between the extreme simplicity of original D&D and the rather baroque complexity of advanced D&D. It's also extremely well explained. All of the rules are very clear and not written by Gary Gygax, who is really not that great at writing rules in a way that could be understood by mortal humans. So, although it's extremely well explained, one of the main problems is that you have the basic rules here, and they also have the expert rules, and the rules are kind of split between them, which means that like the rules for levels 1 through 3 are in here, and the rules for higher level characters are in the other one. The monsters are kind of split between them, and so on. So the whole point of BX Essentials, which is put out by Gavin Norman, is to take all of those rules and organize them in a much more easily referenced way. So what he's done is he's taken all of those rules, and all of the rules are in one booklet. All of the classes are in another, including all of the rules for all of the levels. All of the spells are here. All of the monsters are compiled here. And then you have adventures and treasure here. This has a lot of really interesting advantages that aren't immediately obvious, I think. And one is that it makes the whole rule set extremely modular. So right now it's just these books, which just covers the BX rules. But over time, Gavin's planning on releasing more little booklets like this that replace different aspects of it. For example, you might have a different book of monsters that he might publish, or a new book of spells, or perhaps classes for entirely different settings. So what you can do is you can essentially construct your own rule set by putting together just the pamphlets that you want. And then you just have that rule set and you use that at the table. The other big advantage of having these little booklets is that it allows the rules to be spread around the table. So for example, you can have one player looking through this to try and look up their spells, while the GM is looking up monster stats, while someone else is looking up the rules, while someone else is making their own character. You don't need to buy a whole bunch of core rule books, you just give people the rules that they need. I love this format, and I love how much attention was paid to the design of it, down to the fact that it was stapled on the spine, which means that it lies a lot more flat than your typical book that gets print on demanded. Now let's look quickly through it. There's nothing super special about this because it is supposed to be just a restatement of those rules in a clearer format. However, the way that it was restated and redesigned is extremely just wonderful. And that's just coming from someone who loves the design of little books like this in terms of how much thought was put into it. I should mention that these are review copies that were sent to me by Gavin. And I was super stoked to get them. I've been looking forward to them for quite some time. As always, there's going to be links down in the description below, but I should point out that the basic text of all of these books is completely free and open for anyone to read. I'll put a link down in the description for that as well. So you got your basic core rules here, and I love the font all done in Souvenir, which matches what we see in the original BX rules. And the thing that immediately pops out is how much care was put into putting all of the rules onto one page or onto 2-page spreads so that there's as little rule flipping as possible. Each page is like a little control panel where you just have all the stuff that you need just for that topic. So you have all the stuff on ability scores right here, for example. You got your sequence of play. You have your adventuring rules. Nothing is really, there's not a lot of DM voice in this as much. You can tell that it's Gavin just because I've read some of his other books, but it's not really elaborate. Instead, it's very clear and is extremely well organized. So you can find the rule that you need very quickly, and it's been written in such a way that there is no real confusion about what the rule is. Even in the BX rules, there were some rules that were a little bit poorly worded, and there were some contradictions in there, and all of that has been ironed over and smoothed out. There are other BX rules sets out there. I think Labyrinth Lord is one of the more popular retroclones. However, all of the other ones, as far as I understand, are not strict clones in the sense that they do put their own spin on the rules. Whereas the idea of BX Essentials is to get as close to the original rules as possible. It's a precise recreation. So if you really want to play those old school rules, this is probably the best place to read it. The original books aren't bad, but there is some problems with usability and clarity in some places. You get your standard combat charts, all here in one place, easy to reference. You get your rules for magic, magic items, and so on. Classes and equipment, this is all in its own book, so that character creation can be done out of one book. And just as in the previous one, we see one-page spread or a two-page spread here, where all of the steps for character creation are carefully laid out with numbers, so you know exactly what to do. It talks about what the attack value matrix is. Since this game does use THAC0 and descending armor class, a lot of people are baffled by that system, but this book does a great job in spelling out very clearly and simply how that works. And once you understand that, it's really not that complicated. You have your ability scores, and then once we get into the classes, we can see that here's the cleric. It's all on one page. All of their level progression and turning undead tables, all on one page. So this is all that you need to see. This stuff just warms my heart when I see design like this. You got your dwarf, you got your elf, which are races as classes. So an elf just is its own class. It's like a hybrid fighter magic user, essentially. You got your fighter right here, you got your halfling right here, and your magic user, and your thief. We get into alignment, how languages work. The art, by the way, is really good. It's all done in these very clear black and white styles. And it ranges anywhere from being pretty good all the way up to being excellent. Your equipment, water transportation, in case you want to do a waterborne adventure. Not many people do these sorts of piratey adventures, but BX has rules for it. Mercenaries and specialists, castles and strongholds. So I know that people like Matt Colville are writing a Strongholds and Followers book, but if you go back to the original books, you got some nice, clean rules here that allow you to do that quite easily. You got your monster book, and it's what you would expect. It's got a few illustrations here and there, but it doesn't focus on illustrating every monster, mostly because they're all very classic types, but also because the focus is on condensing the information, excuse me, to be as easily referenceable as possible. You have these very clean stat blocks. You have these little bullet points for each of their special abilities, making them super easy to run in actual play. Your dragon turtles, your elephants, your elves, and so on. I remember talking to him or hearing him talk on Google Plus about designing this book and the pains that he went through to fit everything exactly onto the proper number of pages. Same deal goes with the spells. Spells in Basic and Expert DnD go up to 5th level for clerics and up to 6th level for magic users. It just uses a different scale than AD&D would eventually use. All of the spells descriptions are very easy to read. We have little bullet points for each important fact that you need to know about the spell. It has the duration, it has the range. It's all just so simple and clean. That's one of the big problems with running a lot of the original rule sets. There's a lot of weird, odd little rules and a lot of notations that are a little bit opaque, whereas this book takes so many pains to make it just as transparent as possible. Finally, we have your Adventures and Treasures book. Designing a dungeon is the very, very beginning of it. It's just a 2-page spread. Here's how you design a dungeon. Here's how you put stuff in it. Because it is called Dungeons and Dragons. You should be making dungeons and running people through them. You got a wilderness, how to make a base town, dungeon encounter tables. All compiled in one place. wilderness encounter tables, all on a 2-page spread. It's designed so much that you could simply print these out almost as handouts, right? Just these 2-page spreads, and use them as like modular rules. You see parties, you got all your different types of magic items here. You get your armor, all your classic stuff, all your potions with clean, easy to read descriptions, your magic rings, your scrolls and maps, everything from the original books, all in one easy to use package. The design of this is so enchanting to me, even though it's so simple, that it really makes me want to run these original rules. Usually I run more modern versions of them, like Lamentations of the Flame Princess is fairly similar to BX DnD in a lot of ways, although it has a lot of modern aspects to it. But just because this makes it so easy, it makes me want to actually test out these rules, just to get a sense for how the game style worked back in the early 80s when this was released. So as always, links down in the description below. Check it out for yourself. You can read the whole thing for free and use this information in your own games without even paying a cent. However, I would definitely shell out some for these pamphlets, as they are really fun. The illustrations are great. The cover art is great. And using them at the table is a lot easier than printing out your own PDFs. So that's it for my review today. Thanks for watching, everybody. And I will see you next Wednesday when I have something really special. Art and Arcana, which is the visual history of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a big coffee table book. Look at that, shiny. And it goes through the entire history of the art of D&D. It's coming out in a week or two, and I will have a review right after it is officially released on Amazon, where you can see what you get inside this massive tome. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys next time.